Hey, gang, this week's episode is brought to you by Royal Retros, the king of throwbacks. Hey, if you're looking for teams and leagues that don't exist anymore, but you'd like to remember them in high-quality jersey or uniform format, hey, some of those teams were legendary, some of them were disasters, but they all live at Royal Retros. Check them out. RoyalRetros.com. Use that promo code SEATS for 10% off all of your purchases. Check them out now. And now, check out this episode.
The white flag is out. Now Alan Kowicki comes down and gets it. There is less than one lap to go around this 1.5 mile oval at Atlanta Motor Speedway. We are not following the leader of the race. We are focused in on Alan Kowicki, who is going to win the 1992 NASCAR Winston Cup and the $1 million bonus that goes with it. Bill Elliott comes off the fourth corner. He wins the Hooters 500. But Alan Kowicki is coming off of corner number 4, knowing that he's winning the championship. There's the checkered flag for Alan. He's the champion for 92.
Welcome to Good Seats Still Available, a curious little podcast devoted to exploring what used to be in professional sports. Here's your host, Tim Hanlon.
Well, welcome back. This is Good Seats Still Available, the curious little podcast that is devoted to what used to be in professional sports. My name is Tim Hanlon. I'm the founder and chief cook and bottle washer around here. I appreciate your finding us. If this is your first time here, welcome to the proceedings. Grab a seat, buckle up, literally this week. If you're a return visitor, we appreciate you doing that too. And hopefully telling your friends and having them tell a couple of friends and so on and so on. Either way, hugely appreciative of your listenership this week as we get into NASCAR, the ultimate summer sport here in these United States. Sure, the World Cup, sure, the NHL's Stanley Cup Championship, sure, the NBA Finals, sure, baseball, sure, the UFL, whatever it is, it's great. But NASCAR is something that is something to behold. Just the embodiment of all things good old American here in these states, especially during the summertime. And we're here to celebrate the champions of NASCAR racing, in particular, the Cup Series. Today, well, it used to be known as Winston Cup, right? And I think a lot of people still have a look back and call it the Winston Cup Series. But it's been called a few things over the years, over the decades and stuff. And we're here to celebrate the new book devoted to each and every one of those champions. The book is called NASCAR Champions. A great title, makes a lot of sense. Every Cup Series champion from 1949 to today. And our guests this week are the authors of said amazing book, Herb Branham and Holly Cain, names probably known to most of you NASCAR aficionados out there, longtime NASCAR journalists, both with great publications and beat reporting of those eras, as well as on the other side, writing for NASCAR as well. We talk about the differences of writing both outside and inside the NASCAR bubble. But beyond that, we get into some really amazing stories and, frankly, a mirror to the history of NASCAR itself. The book is gorgeous. It's coffee table worthy, dominated by amazing photography and some great narrative storytelling. That, frankly, is synonymous with the evolution of NASCAR itself. It's sort of laid out in a decade-by-decade format, and literally the stories of these champions are amazing to behold, to see, to understand, and literally step-by-step along with the growth of NASCAR racing itself. This is an amazing book. I highly recommend it, and of course, you can find it wherever good books are found, including, of course, the links in this show description as you're receiving this episode this week, or on our website at Good Seats Still Available. All you got to do is search up this episode numbered 450, and you'll find a couple of convenient links there. And those links will point you to our friends at Amazon, where you will get this hardcover coffee table gorgeous book in all its 216 pages of glory. From our friends at Motorbooks/Corto, that's the publisher, as quickly as humanly possible from our friends at Amazon, who give us some shekels of referral love when you purchase in that general manner. We appreciate that. You could also get it as an ebook I believe, too. So great stories to come. I think you will also find it as intriguing as I did having it. The book is forwarded by, of all people, Mark Martin, who never won a Cup Series championship. That's interesting. We talk about sort of that, how that came to be, as well as the obligatory remembrance of the great Kyle Busch, who himself was in the Champions Circle a couple of times, and his untimely passing a few weeks back. We remember him as well as part of this conversation, too. So sit back and enjoy this conversation. If you're a race fan, you will devour this discussion. If you're not a race fan, give it a listen anyway, because I think you'll find enough of these stories to be intriguing enough, and hopefully maybe a little bit of a hint to get the book and learn more, as I often do. Please, as always, enjoy. Can you give our audience a bit of background on the two of you and your adjacency, shall we say, to the world of NASCAR?
Yeah, Holly, do you want to open up or?
You can go on and start her.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I for a long time I was I'm from Indianapolis, so that kind of tells you a little bit of what you're going to learn.
As we record this, by the way, an interesting day, because we're recording on the eve or the few hours just before the Indianapolis 500. So I know you're distracted, but I hope you can power through this conversation.
No, that's why when I saw this time, and Holly and I thought, what better time to do this on the day of the biggest day in racing. So it's a good day to do something like this. Holly and I go back to the Tampa Tribune, the once great newspaper, like so many are no longer around. And I covered motorsports, and then she took over for me. And then, a few years after that, lo and behold, I was working for NASCAR, where I worked for 2 decades, and I was helping her when she was in the media for various outlets and that type of thing. She's worked for Dallas Morning News, Seattle Post-Intelligentsia, on AOL.com, and NASCAR.com, NASCAR Wire Service. I think that's it. And now she's working for the NASCAR Wire Service, and constantly we've, our careers have kind of paralleled each other. And now, after all these years, we're getting to do these books. NASCAR Champions, which we're here to talk about today, is the second in what appears to be a 3-part series. We're working on one more, NASCAR Rivalries, I think soon. It's not definite, but we've done NASCAR Mavericks and NASCAR Champions. It's been a real joy to kind of reunite with, somebody you worked with so many years ago, and here we are, still doing it.
Holly, is he true? Is it all correct? Does it all check out?
Yeah, I guess kind of hard to add to that. Herb did a great job with it, but yeah, it has been wonderful. And we met at the very first day I ever covered a race in Sebring, Florida. So we have literally known each other since my very first race 36 years ago, and worked together in various ways, either together on a newspaper staff or when Herb was working for NASCAR and I was still working on a newspaper staff. But it's really been wonderful to be able to do this book project together, and something that we're both very passionate about.
So we've had a few conversations in and around NASCAR and racing generally, and we remembered some old tracks like Riverside back in the day, et cetera. But can you enlighten me a little bit further, maybe the audience too, by adjacency, how one gets into, as a sports writer or somebody who writes back in the day, right, newspaper writing or however that old fashioned skill. How does one get into, or did get into, the racing beat? Because it's a little different than the stick and ball kind of dynamic, I think. And also, too, I'm really curious as to your particular experiences as to how it's evolved because of technology and stuff. Because you hinted at it, right? I mean, the NASCAR Wire Service, right? So many leagues today are so focused on creating their own narratives and their own social media and their own stuff, right? Especially because of the absence of what used to be beat reporting.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, Herb, do you want me to?
Holly, you should go ahead and outline that, since you've had to do this incredible dance between working for outlets and freelance through the years. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's definitely been the case, and as you mentioned, with newspapers in the beginning, there were typically what they consider the major beats, especially if your hometown or the paper you worked for had an NFL or Major League Baseball or basketball or hockey team, and so there were beat writers, and then often you had the racing was kind of, I don't want to say on the side, but it was an extra thing, and both Herb and I love doing it. So we volunteered every opportunity we could to cover any of these big races. And certainly being in Florida, we were fortunate to have the Daytona 500 right there and, be close enough to Talladega. And so what became our tracks, so to speak, also were the biggest ones in NASCAR. But you're absolutely right. Herb has a big background in tennis. I covered the Dallas Cowboys when I worked in Dallas. I covered the Seattle Mariners when I worked in Seattle. So we definitely have the other sports background, but kind of the thread through it all, through all these decades, has been auto racing. And for me, it's been something not just as a sport, but really kind of again, like a passion thing. I really have enjoyed it. It's a whole different ball ball game, so to speak. But it's been really a wonderful opportunity in my career.
Yeah, it's followed a real arc, this motorsports coverage. Back when Holly and I first started to do it, a lot of times, nobody wanted to do that. Nobody wanted to do motorsports, and a lot of times they would give it to the younger person or the person who wasn't doing something that weekend and all that. Well, then in the late 90s, that started to change when NASCAR popularity went absolutely through the roof, and all of a sudden people wanted that beat. And lo and behold, outlets started hiring designated motorsports writers, and that was their number one beat. And then in 2006, 2008, that evaporated. And I got to tell you, nobody had a better real-time readout of that evaporation than we did in NASCAR, going to the media centers and all of a sudden seeing all the empty seats, whereas before we had to always look for more seats to find room for media.
Well, I don't want to bring the room down, but it's important to kind of bring that up.
Yes, it is.
I'd love to hear
Yeah.
your as we will segue into the meat and the potatoes of this, but I'm really curious to hear your perspectives on the how, the when, the why, I guess, of that after that meteoric, rise in, if you will, national popularity, right? It's probably you're describing that period of time when the rest of the country somehow discovered what had largely been a regional, with some exception, kind of phenomenon. Why do you think it snapped back, so to speak? And because I can't really get any clear answers as to why, or maybe there aren't any clear answers as to why it sort of started to wane, so to speak, a bit.
Yeah, I got a couple. I'll start off because, I was on the inside NASCAR, and, NASCAR was really dependent upon a huge travel crowd for their fans. People who would load up in homes, or rent really expensive hotel rooms for 4 days at a time. And when the economy changed and everything kind of went south, we lost a lot of those traveling fans. You also, some of the reasons for the ticket sales to go down was a little hidden aspect a lot of people weren't aware of. A lot of times at every event, corporate sponsors buy huge blocks of tickets to then give away. They pay for them when it all comes out, but all of a sudden these huge corporate blocks of tickets weren't around anymore, and you started seeing chunks of empty grandstands, which kind of made it, look a little bit worse than it is. I mean, come on, Bristol, some weeks back, they had like almost 80,000 people. Pretty good. They used to get 162,000. So, it's all relative and everything. But when the economy changed, NASCAR took it exceptionally hard. I didn't mean to take up too much time.
No, Holly, what do you think?
Well, I would agree with Herb, and I would also say that maybe the landscape of the journalist has changed a little too over the course of the last decade.
Oh, yeah.
Certainly,
Oh, yeah.
as you podcasters and people that have huge social media followings and, you know, different. It became more of a personal style thing, and you know, they weren't writing for major outlets, but they were writing for smaller online sites. And to me, that's really kind of where it shifted. And you know, frankly, there aren't as many newspapers to be had to send people right now. So the newspaper coverage has waned. However, that has kind of been eclipsed now, and certainly I think the video aspect is
Yeah.
higher, and you know, just the way you go about coverage is completely different. I see a lot of young people in the media centers all over the country, and it's quite interesting because they are as eager to talk to the drivers about the cologne they wear and the tennis shoes they like best, oftentimes, as they are their finishes or their streaks that they might be on, or you know, how well they typically have done at a certain track. So it's definitely been a change in the approach.
Well, the irony, of course, is as we now segue, hopefully smoothly here, is it's also a shift, I think, and I think you kind of hinted at it, sort of the reportage, right? Right. You kind of mentioned a little bit of sort of how you approach the beat back in the day, but you know, it's undeniable that the video thing, in particular, the storytelling and or the accoutrements that come along with that, right? Everybody seems to kind of circle around what Netflix and the Formula One series was all about, right? The idea of drawing out stories, right? Telling stories about the people
Yeah.
involved, right? And their, you know, that making them more personable, and then the rivalries and all that kind of stuff, right? In some respects, you know, people driving around in a car, right, are not unlike professional football players, are a little harder to kind of get to because you can't see their faces. You can't see them during the course of the action. In the case of a race, it's, you know, 3-4 hours long in some cases, right? So it's really interesting to sort of see that the narratives are so, I don't know, desired by all these sports properties. And I have to think that NASCAR is recognizing that very quickly, that you know, we need to tell more stories and their personalities and stuff. I hope it doesn't go to World Wrestling, you know, heels and faces and that kind of stuff, right? But narratives do help drive interest, right?
If I could
Absolutely.
just kind
Yeah.
of jump in, I was in Indianapolis for the 500 this week, and there was a big debut of Kyle Larson, who's the reigning NASCAR Cup Series champion, a two-time champion. And, you know, they were rolling out on Prime Video a huge documentary on him. There was another documentary on Bobby Rahal. So really, as you mentioned, that's kind of what is happening now is this polished, often long form situation where people can learn about people, but it's being told in a different way. The storytelling is very different.
And yeah, another little segue when we start talking about stories, that's the backbone of NASCAR's appeal. It always has been. You know, the racing is obviously a big part of it, but it's always been the characters and the personalities and the way they related to fans, the drivers. That's the backbone of the sport. That's what Holly and I have been trying to bring out on these two books we've done, is really trying to unearth those types of stories and find some things that nobody ever knew about. On our books, if you want stats or analysis of carburetors versus fuel injection, that sort of thing, you're going to have to go somewhere else. If
Well,
you want to read some really raucous, sometimes hilarious, sometimes poignant, but real as hell stories, that's what we're trying to bring back. What you were just talking about: stories, personalities, character, flavor.
and one thing, if I could add, you know, um, unlike the NFL and baseball and things like that, I mean, I would argue that that these NASCAR drivers are some of the most accessible professional athletes around. You cannot walk on the football field and hang out with the starting quarterback 2 minutes before he runs on the field to start the game. Fans get to stand at the car alongside their favorite driver, shake his hand, maybe get a photo literally minutes before he climbs in that car to race. And the other part of that is there is, while you obviously there are cameras and you can see them, the audio that you get from inside the car is amazing. And it's really quite interesting. And NASCAR has been, actually helping you get the channels of the drivers that you want to listen to. So there really is a huge amount of access in this sport.
Yeah, and that's hugely ironic, right? Because in many respects, I think a lot of the world of sports, pro and maybe college, which is hardly hard to distinguish between that and pro these days, it seems. They almost NASCAR is basically probably the ultimate template, right, for the integration of marketing and advertising, if you will. It's embedded, it's expected, right? It's understood, and perhaps even overly so, but it's just part of the deal, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah, that's what helped this thing take off in the mid to late '90s. Once again, just as much as the racing and the drivers, is just the access with the fans. I mean, all of a sudden, NASCAR was bigger than just about everything except the NFL for a while. But yet, the fans could still go to a race and get this unbelievable access, which really wasn't that different from a local short track, in terms of being able to just walk right up and get autographs and all that sort of thing. And also for the media, the access was so much easier and accessible in the whole thing. That's what helped this whole thing take off. And, I think all these different media outlets and channels that you have right now, they're really kind of helping fill the void for, viewership may not be quite what it is on television, but that's skewed because there's millions of people accessing the races now on second screen viewing on their tablets or their phones and all of that. There's a reason why the networks still pay the big money for the TV contracts. There's a reason they're getting their worth out of all that second screen viewing, advertisers are, and that sort of thing. So it's a different landscape, not like it was, but it's still pretty damn good.
Well, to the book, right? It's gorgeous, as the first one was too, and it's published by Corto/Motor Books. It's kind of a double branded thing, and with any luck, we'll have a couple of copies to give away to some of our listeners. So, knock on wood there. Tell me though how you. I was kind of surprised. I really haven't, and maybe I just haven't been looking for. This is to your point earlier, right? It's not sort of stats and gearhead focused stuff, right? It's really a compilation of everybody who's won what I would argue is a probably very difficult thing to do, and that's win a season-long NASCAR, formerly Winston Cup. I still kind of go back to that sometimes. But
That's okay.
Cup Series championship, right?
Yeah.
How do you guys go about? The good news is that that's a defined list, right? And you know the people, they're the repeat winners and all that stuff. What's your approach to setting all of this up in terms of a narrative form and an enjoyable way to understand this? Because there are a number of different ways you could kind of approach how you lay all this stuff out. But the way you did it by 20-year chunks is pretty interesting and almost, shall I say, kind of lays in very nicely in many respects with the evolution of NASCAR itself.
Yeah, we had it wherever if a multi-time champion, it was wherever he won his first title. That's where he would be grouped. But in terms of the actual approaches, I don't think you could probably have two writers who approach things as differently as Holly and I. Holly, you get to go first, how you approach this, because
two of you are here. Is it an accomplishment in and of itself? Huh? Okay, good.
We are so different in our approaches, I think. But go ahead, Holly.
Well, I tease her. That's because I see all of these guys every week, and I am held. What? But I have long admired Herb's writing, first of all, and it's really a fun read and all of the chapters that he does. And, my approach with it, and I think Herb's was to a certain extent, was to tell a story that maybe you hadn't heard.
Right.
And whether that be from the driver himself, or like I did the chapter on Richard Petty, and I primarily used Mario Andretti talking about Richard Petty, because I thought that was really cool. You know, arguably the two greatest racing legends in the history of the United States. Some would argue, you know, up on the top 5 in the world. So anyway, we kind of approached it in different ways. But I think for me, I really wanted someone to read the chapters that I wrote and say, at some point somewhere, wow, I did not know that. And I think the other key to this is letting people in on the personalities of these guys. That's the one thing. If they, you know, they sit there with their helmets on and they speak to the press right after, and to a certain extent are very, you know, politically correct in terms of they're not going to say any horrible thing about someone. So we got these guys and had a chance to really talk to them. And in the case of Herb and I, we covered so many of them. And the ones that have passed or that were early on, we knew people that had raced with them or were close to them. Herb has some really fantastic chapters there. And you know, the other thing that I really love about this book and the storytelling is our foreword by Mark Martin, who is such an incredible NASCAR driver and never won the championship. He's a Hall of Fame member. He came runner-up so many times. And the fact that he said, you bet, I would love to write the foreword on a Champions book, really, I don't know. It says a lot about him, and it made me feel really good about our project.
All right, Holly. Before,
Yeah, I think Holly really helps, you know, in that type of thing. You know, I was on the scene for so many years, but then I worked for the sanctioning body. There's probably a lot of those guys are probably tired of me, but you know, they see Holly currently, and she really gives us you know, a front connection to these guys on a weekly basis now. And I think was a big factor in getting all the cooperation we had from so many people so easily.
please tell me how the Mark Martin conversation happens to get him to write this.
That's Herb. He ultimately did that.
It was my idea. I'll claim it, because then I told Holly and she said, yeah, you mentioned it. And people said, is he out of his damn mind? And somebody else said, that's the stupidest idea I ever heard. He'll never do that. And so I call up Mark. He goes, sure thing. That's how it happened.
I
He
will
said, sure
say,
thing.
yeah, I will say that I think he has a good relationship with Herb and I, and so
Yes.
he knew
Yes.
that what we were doing, you know, was of respect.
Yes. And he said yes immediately. And so I called him, and he all he did, he talked, dictated it. I did it word for word, sent it back to him. He goes, perfect. All this after all that, fellow know-it-alls in the media center said that I was out of my mind. It all took about an hour, and it's one of the highlights of the book.
Agree.
Yeah. And then, we had the afterword, and that sadly ended up being one of the highlights too. Rex White, the great champion from 1960, I talked to him, and I had gotten to know him real well when I worked at NASCAR. And he made the Hall of Fame, thank goodness, after kind of campaigning for it for years and years. So I talked to him for the story about him, and I said, hey, I'm going to call you back because I need to get a little bit more because I'd like you to give me some stuff for the afterword. No problem. So I call him back a couple weeks later, and we do that. And I could just tell he seems just a lot worse and to deal with his voice and everything. And lo and behold, just a week later, he was dead. And so that was pretty poignant. But once again, how special. I mean, he told me a couple great little stories that, really adds a real touching footnote to the book, and pretty lucky to have had that from another great champion, Rex White.
Was the idea to talk to as many of these drivers as possible to get them kind of in their own words and a little bit more reflective and sort of synthesize those comments into your, versus just a third party kind of just, overview from your perspective, or was it just? Tell me about like how originally thoughtful you wanted to get their opinions into this.
Oh, we did, right, Holly? We wanted to talk to everybody. As I joked in our introduction, I was even contemplating a séance with Bobby Isaac, but I didn't have budget to get a medium for that. But I mean,
Oh,
no, we went
that
for it. We
expensive.
we
Okay.
yeah, we got everybody that we could.
And was were any of them? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but were there
Oh,
any folks who were reluctant or a little standoffish, or were they all?
No,
Yeah, okay.
no. I mean, in both of our experiences, no. And to be honestly with you, there's no book quite like this that is specifically the behind the scenes or the stories of each of the drivers. And one of the great things about it is that it's something that you could pick up and read about Richard Petty and then put it down, and then a couple days later pick it up and read about whoever else you want to read. It's not something that you have to read cover to cover in one sitting. The photographs are amazing. The stories are all interesting, and as I said, hopefully, for the most part, something you might not have known before. So it's really just the layout and the way the book came together. I'm very proud of, and I know Herb is too.
oh, but yeah, absolutely. And you got back to the way that we approach the stories. Holly, I think approaches things a little bit more traditionally. And be quite honest, man, I'll just sit around whatever I start throwing up against the wall sticks. Sometimes, and I'll just start going in a direction and I'll go, that's pretty good. Let's just go with that. But my stories are probably like little miniature opinion pieces more, a little wackier, but that's okay. I just try to have fun with this thing. You got to have fun. That's another thing that built
Yeah.
this sport with the fans was the fun. And I think that our books are really bringing fun back. I like reading some of the fan reactions from it, which is pretty good most of the time. And fan reaction, about 98% has been positive. So that's pretty good when you do a book.
So we all know these legendary names, and frankly, some of them are a little obscure to the modern day fan, right? I mean, but it's hugely important to kind of be comprehensive about this, right? I mean, the one-time champions, those from the earliest days, from the 50s and 60s, when it was solidly a regional kind of dynamic to the nationalization, if you will, in the 80s and the 90s, and where we are today. And obviously, as time rolls on, right, the availability of those folks tends to dissipate as people get older and pass away. Um, how about some of what the conversations? Do any sort of stand out and maybe were surprising to you? Right, I'm sure a lot of the ones that are around today are pretty well known, and you pretty much understand their personalities and stuff, and probably covered them for years and stuff. But were there any that kind of stood out, or maybe sent you on a different trajectory from what you thought you were going to be, how you were going to be doing their narrative in the book?
Yeah. When I started doing a couple of these, it was easy to kind of focus on just like one thing. With a particular guy. Like for instance, I did the Bobby Isaac story, and he was just like such an interesting uh, character.
For our audience, he was the guy who won in 1970, right?
You got it, you got it. Only one title, immensely popular. It was all, like potential unfulfilled. And that was kind of the angle I got on that. Um, with Bobby Isaac. I also did the Red Byron story, the story about NASCAR's first champion. On the other end of the spectrum, there was only one way to focus on that. It was so obvious, he was like, in effect, not a hero officially, but he really was, he had a terrible war injury, which he brought back, and it made the rest of his life kind of tough, but he had to have his left leg strapped to the clutch pedal to be able to drive. And my angle there kind of developed into, that maybe Red Byron had a little advantage racing, because racing wasn't that big of a deal for a guy who used to be a tail gunner in World War II. And so that kind of took a little bit of a different angle. And so with Red Byron, I had to go, whoa, whoa, whoa. He raced cars. Remember, even though this other part is a bit more compelling and a bit more interesting and really a bit more vital to telling the reader who Red Byron was. So, it was really I guess the stories kind of, made themselves for me. That just kind of popped out on what was the right thing to hang on to. That was
And
for me.
I would say, and Herb, kind of along the lines of that, finding out things about some of the drivers that I wasn't alive to cover, or, you know, I almost felt like a lot of them could be a book on their own. I mean, there was so many interesting things to tell and to share that it was enjoyable. The process of writing this book was really enjoyable, and so I think that shows in the writing that it produced.
Yeah, no doubt.
It's interesting you mentioned Bobby Isaac, because the 1970 was a very interesting year for NASCAR generally, right? Because that was the last year that it was essentially under the Grand National kind of branding and format.
Yeah.
Became actually the legit sort of quote unquote Cup Series, soon to be sponsored by Winston and all the branding that came along with that. I don't want to put you guys on the spot, but can you kind of nuance for our audience who might be a little bit more, cursory to this? What kind of difference does that sort of mean? I mean, because the way these champions every year since 1949 were crowned, right? I won't say they changed all the time, but there were certainly tweaks, if you will, to the process, right? What I don't know is what the difference between Grand National and the Cup Series dynamic was. Was there any, or was it just a branding thing? What constituted things were run?
When Winston came on, they got rid of all those extra races. I say extra. They condensed the schedule and turned it into a sport that was going to concentrate on bigger racetracks, and they weren't going to go to every nook and cranny. At the time, it's kind of funny. I wasn't paying attention to it in 1970, but I bet at the time that was probably a big deal to a lot of people, especially those small tracks. But now people look at the Winston Cup as kind of like with a real romance about it. But that was the big thing when Winston sponsorship came on. They turned it into a real big league thing, and we didn't need to have like 50 races or whatever it was. It
Right.
was a lot. It was a lot. And but I don't really know in terms of beyond just the sheer busyness of the schedule, if there was a real dynamic. It was the same guys, and but immediately what started to happen when Winston came on, and here came the money, and here
Yeah.
came the corporate sponsorship, and so that was the thing the dynamic that really kind of took over the sport. But in terms of the actual competition, I would just think that now, racers, could concentrate on a far less number of races, which was a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, my interpretation would be there was more regionality to it, right? I won't call it minor leagues per se, but it was more. There was more.
Oh, that's pretty good. That's
There's more
pretty good. Yeah.
roots, right, so to speak, right, where you can kind of go to your local track, and then there's there's the, I don't know, and to me that's actually it may be interesting, and maybe you guys have an opinion on this. I mean, there's no question that there is the regional and small tracks and stuff around the country. It's an interesting culture that I did not grow up with. I grew up in the New York metropolitan area, so I didn't really have a whole lot of exposure to it. But those are very like alive and vibrant, and then there's a whole. The streaming world has certainly discovered all of this stuff, and that's how I've sort of come to know some of this stuff. But in some respects, it looks like that's what could be. I wouldn't call it a revival, but there is something to be said about let's call it the minor leagues or the feeders or whatever. And I think that today's national NASCAR fan or casual NASCAR fan really doesn't understand the true infrastructure or roots underneath it, so to speak, right? It's not fully defined, I think, for most, that there is all these other sort of circuits on a regional and local level, right? That I don't know, maybe could be harmonized better to maybe re-engage fans to be a little bit more, regional, international kind of thing. So in some respects, you're describing what the Winston Cup kind of dynamic was, right? Which was nationalizing it, making it a national property, a league like all the other stick and ball leagues. But in some respects, this is almost like, minor league baseball is so entrenched, right? And that's certainly part of the dynamic of baseball. Why not the same for NASCAR, perhaps in a modernized form? That's just my approach and my thought, because the assets are there, right?
Well,
Yeah.
and something that should be pointed out that's kind of unique about this, I would consider it very unique, is that a lot of the local short tracks that, as Herb mentioned, are getting a lot more attention now. You have the young drivers that are 15 and 16-year-olds racing against guys that are in their 50s that just like to do it as a hobby. So you've got kind of competing dynamics of young drivers that are winning races, getting their names out, winning sponsors, so that they can advance to NASCAR's highest ranks. And then you have other drivers that it just didn't work out for them. Maybe they didn't have the talent, the opportunity, the money to do it, but they're still competing against it. So the local short tracks are a very interesting scene, shall we say, but they're where you have to go to get groomed to be able to make it into the NASCAR Cup Series now. That's where you start.
Yeah, NASCAR has a pretty extensive short track program, but there's plenty of other short tracks that aren't part of the NASCAR family. We had talked about the changing dynamics when Winston came on. Yeah, and I went back just to make sure I knew my numbers here. Yeah, the races went from get this, from in 71. Well, they had already started because they went from 47 down to like 31.
And not all the drivers competed in
Right.
all of those races
Yeah.
back before the Winston days either. I mean, you might have
No.
had, I believe there were some years where there were, 60, maybe even 70 races on a schedule, and
Hmm.
not all the drivers ran every single one of those.
No, it would typically just be a handful
Yeah, they're
of,
all chasing.
like
They're
say
all,
15, 10 to 15.
yeah, they're all chasing purses too, right? That's the fight,
Right.
right?
Right.
Yes. Yeah. So, it's that kind of changed there in the whole thing. Yeah, and with the change came, some different point systems and all that. The point system has been around, or it has been changed probably like six times. A lot of people, and it used to be, in recent years, people have said it's so complicated now with the first the chase, then the playoffs, and the final four. Well, let me tell you, if you go back to the mid 60s, you try to figure out the point system, good luck. You better have a
Well,
couple cups of coffee in about an hour.
it's just been changed for this year, the way the champion
Yeah,
is
right.
decided even. So, I
Yeah.
mean, it's definitely itinerations. And that's one of the things I wrote about with Jimmy Johnson, who won 7 championships. I think they changed the way the points championship was decided 3 or 4 different times in that span of when he was winning. And largely because people got tired of the same guy winning the championships. I mean, it's never happened before. Jimmy won 5 of the 7 in consecutive seasons. Never happened before.
Yeah.
So let's get into a couple of names here as we kind of round the turn three, shall we say? The Give me a sense of. We all know the Richard Pettys and the Dale Earnhardts and the Jeff Gordons and the Lee Pettys, and some of these names are just otherworldly in terms of their classicness, their outside personalities, and all that stuff. Who do you think amongst this robust list that is featured in this book, these champions, who do you think's underrated or forgotten, or somebody whose story, or maybe there are a few, I'm sure there are a few, are need to be heralded more, or should be, or maybe you discovered and maybe now newly appreciate that you didn't before?
Holly, I'll let you go first.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a tough question because I will say that the thing that has stood out to me has been the guys that really did not come from racing families, so to speak. People that got into this sport and didn't necessarily come from a lot of family wealth and didn't come from a family that had any idea about racing as it is, as a profession. And those are kind of people that to see them win at the highest level and even frankly to get an opportunity to win at the highest level, those were the champions that I always kind of thought that this is something really special, and it speaks volumes to who they are, which also explains part of why they have that championship mentality, the thing that kind of puts them over the edge. So I was definitely enjoyed writing about that. You could take the current champion right now, Kyle Larson. Now, obviously, he grew up racing in short tracks, but he's from California. His parents were blue collar workers. And I bet if you were to ask him 15 years ago, would he have thought he had won one championship? He would have said no, much less two. And so that was somebody that I look at and I give a whole lot of credit for what he did. Also, Kurt and Kyle Busch coming from Las Vegas, kind of the same sort of thing. They did all of their training on, short tracks in the Las Vegas area. For many, many years, the West Coast was not where you thought of NASCAR drivers coming from. And yet, if you look in the last 20 years, I think there are more championships from people that are from west of the Mississippi than there are east, and definitely more so than even North Carolina, dare I say.
Yeah, when I did this, there was one guy, one story that I did that kind of jumped out at me and kind of reminded me of something that I already knew in my heart and soul, but I think like a lot of people, especially the casual fans, have kind of forgotten. Matt Kenseth is really a great driver. And, talk about a guy who got a bad rap in 2003. He won only one race, but won the championship and led the points, most of the season. And that was the last straw for NASCAR and particularly Brian France for the old point system. Um, but then when I started doing the Kansas story and really I talked to him extensively, really started looking at his background and looking again at all the great races he won after that championship season. He had so many seasons that were so much better than his championship season. But he just gets labeled as the guy who created the playoffs, and there is something to that. He was the catalyst. But he didn't create it. And just because he had that one season that was kind of lackluster, he didn't make the points. And I urge fans who don't care much for Matt Kenseth's legacy is to go back and look at his stats and see everything he did, both before and after winning the 2003 championship. Great, great, great driver, which I think history has kind of given him a short shrift.
Why do you think it's been so difficult, especially over the last couple of decades, to create the right formula that determines the champion in this circuit? Fans have their voices, right? There'll always be naysayers based on how the system sort of works and stuff. But there's always been tinkering. There's always been changes to it. Some would say that that's NASCAR just responding to fans, and that's what makes NASCAR unique because they do, on occasion or mostly, listen to what fans say or do. Not always by certain circles. Why do you think it's been so challenging to come up with a formula that everybody can like and agree on, and that is determinant of a winner?
Well, in our book, we have a story about the history of the championship point system and how it's evolved and changed. We don't really, critique it. I don't like any of them. If
Wow,
you can,
don't hold back, Herb.
I don't. I mean, the first early years was just goofy and complicated. Um, the Winston thing, if you go back and look at it, it awarded, season long, but I forget the stat, but it's at least half of the times during the Winston Cup era, the person that led the points coming out of the July race won the title. And that's exciting, right? And I actually kind of like the chase format, which they've gone back to now as the best one. I didn't like the winning you're in thing. I kind of like the chase, but it's not easy. It's not easy to keep everybody. You got a lot of constituents starting now with TV, moving over to sponsors. Eventually, you get around to teams and drivers and fans, but it's a lot to satisfy, and it's a lot of strong voices, and it's not an easy job to try to figure out who's going to be your champion. So while people like to blast NASCAR, it's not easy. That's for sure, because I don't think they've ever gotten a point system right.
Well, and I would agree that what Herb's saying is what a lot of fans have said. I mean, but you got to hand it to them. They've at least tried
Yeah, yeah,
different
repeatedly.
variations to try and have it work. So, but I have always gone back to this is what it is and this is what it is.
Yeah,
So if you
yeah.
won it in that championship format, that's how you won it and you're the champion. It doesn't do any good to complain and say, I wish it was this or that. So,
Yeah, I think it was just kind of tough with the old system to go back and see a guy who won 11 or 12 races and finished third in the points.
right.
Yeah, I mean, come on. Now likewise, it was, I don't know, it was a little bit strange to see a guy who could theoretically win the Daytona 500, finish last the rest of the year, last. He'd be in the playoffs and he could still win the championship. I don't know if that's cool. I don't know. Talk about a dilemma.
I mean, you could break it into halves, and there's a lot of different things
Yeah.
you can sort of bring into the mixture and stuff. All right, I want to get your thoughts about the future, the current and the future of NASCAR to round up in a second, but I can't let this conversation go without hearing your respective thoughts on just the sudden passing of Kyle Busch. I think it took everybody by storm, and I think, frankly, people who aren't even racing or NASCAR fans certainly knew the name and the legacy, and obviously part of this book, right? He's won he's been a winner and not just on this circuit, right? Elsewhere too, and ironically, just a week ago, won in the place where he kind of cut his teeth on the national front on the Truck Series. So, your thoughts and your conversations and your memories of truly one of the legends of the sport.
Yeah, this really hit Holly and I especially hard. Holly, why don't you tell him why? We just were with him, it's,
Well, yeah, he
yeah.
actually, we did a Q&A at Talladega Super Speedway in Alabama just before the race. And Kyle came on stage with us for probably a good 40 minutes talking about the book, answering questions from us, from fans, from a moderator. And he was so enthused about it that he did something that not many drivers do. He turned around and asked Herb and I to autograph his book. This coming from a guy that's used to being asked for autographs all the time. But I
Yeah.
I would agree that I covered the race in Dover, so I was there for his win in the trucks there. And by the way, he has 234 wins in the top three series, which is the most all time. The next closest is Richard Petty with 200 victories in the Cup Series. So Kyle has just been so diverse. He brought a level of excitement to every race because he was the favorite. It was almost like, okay, who's going to be able to beat Kyle? It wasn't even can you win? It was who can beat Kyle because he was that good. He was absolutely amazing. But I'm going to also point out that away from the track, I mean, he would give it to you. He'd give it to the media, he'd give it to his competitors. He was definitely up with a zinger, and he told it like it is, good and bad. But for me, what I always appreciated about him was how he was away from the track, and he was absolutely devoted to his wife Samantha, his two children, Lennox and Brexton. He was absolutely wonderful to them, and I feel for them. I just can't even believe it. And I will tell you, I just interviewed Mario Andretti about this the day after Kyle passed away. And I wish you could have seen the look on Mario's face. He said, I was with him on Tuesday of that week, last week.
God.
And it's something, it's impactful across. I mean, Formula One drivers are sending condolence messages. It's really just a huge loss in the motorsports community. And it's a personality and talent unlike any.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody about this the other day, and Nick, he's the greatest villain since Earnhardt, and maybe the best driver too since Earnhardt. Really, I think a lot of people would say that. But a quick, Kyle Busch. I worked at NASCAR. We didn't like him that much. The day he won at Bristol in the new car of tomorrow and got out and told the world, this car sucks. Yeah, that kind of put us on at odds with Kyle Busch. He always said what he was on his mind, but through the years, like a lot of people do, I think he had kind of softened a bit, and getting married, having a couple of kids, and as Holly mentioned, away from the track. He was kind of like a regular guy. What a great day great event Holly and I had with him there at Talladega. It was nice to spend some time. It was clear that Kyle Busch, wasn't the same Kyle Busch who I had met when he was a teenager, obviously, and it was nice to see. And now he's gone. And tell you what, this is a big loss.
Yeah. Yeah.
Big loss for NASCAR and for Richard Childress. I mean, my gosh, they
Yeah.
weren't winning. They weren't winning races, but they were trying, and you had to feel like eventually that would have come around. But just whether it came around or not, Kyle Busch no longer on the scene. Hard to imagine.
And it's worth pointing out, Richard Childress, his team owner, was also the team owner for Dale Earnhardt. So this is a couple of the
Yes.
high-profile drivers with this, I feel for Richard so much. I mean, it's just heartbreaking beyond.
It's
Yeah,
very
it's if there's a silver lining in this, the fact that it's the race is in Charlotte this week where everybody's home. Um, yeah, think about that for a minute. I mean, that's a weird silver lining, but it's so fortunate that they can, be around friends and family at this tough time.
Yeah, and we're recording this literally hours before the Coca-Cola 600, the biggest and longest race, if you will, on the NASCAR circuit. It's interesting that you're hearkening back to the Dale Senior, right? Because I wouldn't say they were sort of cut from the same cloth, but it's interesting and ironic, right? That they both, right, embraced to a large extent their quote unquote villain status, so to speak, right? I mean, like Kyle, I mean, for years, right, just leaned into, he would bow in front of the fans that were booing him, right, when he won a race and stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
It's really interesting, and this is the thing I fear, and I'm going to segue this into your thoughts about where NASCAR goes from here. We live in a world now, for whatever reasons, and there are multiple. We talked before about sort of the storytelling and the personality angles and all that kind of stuff, and that the hype, if you will, that behind that sort of drives, literally and figuratively in this case, why to watch, right? I mean, and I fear that a lot of leagues, and especially fledgling ones or ones that are, looking for broader audiences, right, are going to kind of lean heavily into either the documentary thing or worse, maybe manufactured personalities and rivalries, right? And when we get into world wrestling, kinds of dynamics and stuff, and the artificiality, right? I think we're already starting to see it with what's on the screen, right? That just simply, it seems innocuous, right, to see a digital ad overlaying a real ad that one might be seeing at a track or on a court or whatever. And no harm, no foul, so to speak. But when you start playing with the results or at least the presentation of the sport, and maybe commingle it maybe a little too much because it could easily be done into the realm of entertainment. I don't know. I worry about that kind of stuff, the integrity of competition, certainly betting and all that kind of stuff. So I'm giving you, I'm projecting a lot of stuff that you maybe don't agree with, but I want to get your sense of, number one, where NASCAR is and is headed, given a crazy competitive sports world out there, lots of private equity money and lots of storytelling and lots of social media and that kind of stuff. And then number two, how does it, I would say resuscitate itself, thrive going forward in that world? And can it avoid being sort of that sort of artificiality and that sort of overly hyped and entertainment kind of thing? I mean, there are a lot of people out there who think that having some villains and some heroes and would reignite some, broadened fandom for this because it gives people something to root for or against. That's a big word salad. What do you think the current and the future of NASCAR is going forward?
Can I go first, Herb? Because
yes, do it.
good at putting the bow ties on things.
Jump right in.
Well, first of all, I would say that NASCAR is absolutely a true sport it is a true sport with entertainment value, which all sports have. The NFL has that. The Major League Baseball, soccer, all of them have some sort of entertainment value. And so I think what NASCAR has done has realized that, seized upon it, and is trying to have the two come together in great ways. The other thing that NASCAR is doing right now is broadening its audience in terms of going places that this sport never went. For so long, it was just considered a Southern sport. And they're racing in Coronado, in San Diego this year. They raced in Mexico City a year ago. Their schedule changes every single year and includes vibrant cities and makes the races part of big events. And so I think that is really key. You can be a part of a big event and still have your competition be absolutely real and legitimate. And that's what it is. So it's just, I believe, a question of continuing to introduce the sport and to have it out there in ways that the modern fan wants to get. I have two children that are in their 20s. They don't watch TV anymore. They listen to podcasts and they watch snippets of things on their phones. And so NASCAR is already very well aware of that. I mean, they have a huge emphasis on it and people working on that. So I think they are positioning themselves to continue to thrive and stay modern and do what they need to do. So I think that that they recognize that, and that's the biggest thing, and they're working on that.
I got a theory. So we had that big lawsuit, Michael Jordan taking NASCAR to task. Looks bad for NASCAR, right? Well, here's what's going to happen. Michael Jordan, this is going to be ultimate irony. Michael Jordan is going to end up putting more money in the France family and NASCAR in everybody's pocket than you can ever imagine. Every time his team wins a race, we're on ESPN, we're on SportsCenter ESPN, we're even on Get Up, those shows that are always about football. We're on every sportscast, every written report. Michael Jordan, Michael Jordan, Michael Jordan. He's going to help rejuvenate this thing. But at the same time, nobody should get the idea that NASCAR is evaporating. It's kind of leveled off a little bit. It's rebounding. It's in good shape. And once again, I want to hearken back to those TV contract numbers. Those TV executives know things, demographics, market expectations that the everyday person is not privy to. Sometimes they don't get it right, but sometimes they do. They've paid a lot of money to invest in NASCAR. There's a reason for that. They see a growth. They see potential. So do I. And that's where I stand. I think it's going to be just fine. Is it going to be maybe like it was in 2000? I don't know. Maybe not. It's going to be just fine.
Do you think the France family perhaps opens up the aperture to perhaps take some outside investment, say from private equity, which is searching for everything in sports as a new asset class, seemingly all of a sudden? I'm not saying private equity solves many problems. Matter of fact, they create more problems than it does, I think, elsewhere. Do you sense that there could be maybe more of a, how can I best say this, modernization of the structure and the organization, or do you think the France family will still have an iron grip on this? Because I think there's a chorus out there of folks who would think that, perhaps that trial did sort of bring out sort of the insularity of this organization, which has been historically its strength and its unique. Mm-hmm. Maybe that needs to evolve with the times. I don't know.
No, it's a good question. I don't know. Jim France is still around. Maybe years from now when Jim's not around anymore, Lisa Kennedy, Ben Kennedy could maybe move in that direction. I wouldn't put anything past the organization. You have to do what you have to do to evolve. And while the money is still substantial, guarantee it's not at least quite as substantial as it once was. There may come a day when they could seek outside investment. Why not? I think they'll do what they have to do to keep this sport, which I remember Tom Brokaw, the great TV journalist, called NASCAR the greatest American sport. I think Lisa and Ben will keep this thing going and where it can again reach for that.
Holly, what do you think? You get the last word.
Well, I really agree with her. But I think that the difference too is that not only do they are they guardians of this sport, it's family to them. It's Lisa's grandfather that started this sport, and so it's a lot different than other things that we may have in terms of NFL and Major League Baseball. There is a real sense of where this started, where it is now, and the same people that have shepherded it through all those years are the ones taking it into the next generation. And frankly, it is exactly that. Each generation is doing different things and taking new looks at it, and that's why it's continued to thrive all these years.
Many thanks to Holly and to Herb. As they say, I learned a lot. And this book is a beaut, if there ever was one. It's a great coffee table accompaniment to your sports collection. Again, it is called NASCAR Champions, every Cup Series champion from 1949 to today. It's got a chapter there for every winner. It's got over 200 gorgeous photos, great commentary, not only by Holly and Herb, but also others as well with their observations, great sidebars and stuff. It's a really rich historical look back at everybody who's won the Cup Series championship, as well as, frankly, a view inside the evolution of the history of NASCAR in and of itself. It is published by our friends at Quarto/Motor Books, kind of a double publishing imprint there. And of course, you can get a copy through the links that we conveniently provide to you in this week's show description, however you're getting this show this week, or going to our website at Good Seats. Still available. Just searching up this episode numbered 450 with our conversation with Herb and Holly and myself, and you will find convenient links to the book there. And we will get, if you purchase in that general manner, some shekels of referral love from our friends at Amazon. Of course, you'll get the book as fast as humanly possible. Kind of a win-win, don't you think? You can follow Herb and Holly on the socials. Herb's on Facebook somewhere out there. Herb Branham, Branham, Herb Branham. And Holly can be found on Instagram and X at the handle _Holly Cain. Holly is Holly, Cain, Cain, all one word, _Holly Cain, both on X and Instagram. You can follow us on the socials too. Have at it. Why not? We're on X at Good Seats Still. We're on the Blue Sky thing at goodseatsstillavailable.com. And we are available just about everywhere else, including YouTube, by the way, where we stream all of our episodes for your convenience. at Good Seats Still Available. All one word. Our email address is hello@goodseatsstillavailable.com. And our chief editor and audio excellence provider, as always, is Jerry Payne, Mr. Jerry Payne. And we appreciate his help, as always. Two. Yes, that's what I'm trying to say. All right. I appreciate you listening. Many, many more stories and conversations to come. Lots of good stuff in the pipeline. Thanks for listening. See you soon.